Today we'll be talking about religion in Moscow and Russia. First, we'll start with the oldest origins of religion in Russia. In pre-Christian Russia, the main religions were highly influenced by the surrounding peoples. The Slavic religion spanned most of the eastern half of Europe, even bleeding into Russia and Scandinavian cultures. According to a Polish study of ancient human remains and DNA from the Slavic area, there is a very strong genetic continuity in the area for many centuries, likely even for millennia. The Slavs are then truly indigenous to the area, setting their religion in the culture of any group who moves into the area. The Kievan Rus founded a loose Slavic federation of tribes, creating a sort of conglomerate nation spanning a huge area north of the Black Sea and all the way up to Finland. The religion of the Kievan Rus, as the Proto-Russian nation, was the Slavic religion, which had existed there for millennia. The main three gods of the religion may be somewhat familiar to you, even if you've not studied the Slavic religion. The first and principal deity of Slavic paganism is Perun, the god of thunder, the sky, and war. His name comes from the Proto-Indo-European thunder god, Perkunos, who is also the origin of the Nordic Germanic god Thor. Svarog, the god of smithing, is similar to the Greek god Hephaestus. He's also father to a few of the other important deities who I will not detail today. The last deity I will mention is Veles, the god of the underworld, wisdom, and magic. In many other pagan religions, gods similar to Veles are considered enemies of the gods. However, Veles is venerated by the Slavs. The Slavic religion remained the primary religion of the Russian area until the 7th century, when Russia became Christianized. The influence of the Slavic religion is still very strong in Russia and the nations of Slavic descent. Orthodox Christianity borrows some practices and traditions from the religion, and the aesthetics of the art and garments have also been incorporated. As well as its influence on other things, people still practice the Slavic religion in its old form today.
In the year 286, Diocletian split the Roman Empire into two administrative halves. This split was made across cultural lines between the Latin-speaking West and the Greek-speaking East. Later, in 313, Emperor Constantine the Great issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity in the Roman Empire. This, combined with the fact that he himself later converted to Christianity, is why he is known by many historians as the first Christian emperor. And at that time, four major centers of Christianity rose. They were Rome, Constantinople, Antioch in modern-day Turkey, and Alexandria, of course, in modern-day Egypt. But then in the 6th century, the Islamic Caliphate conquered both Alexandria and Antioch, sweeping away literally half of the centers of Christendom. This left only two centers, Rome and Constantinople. And at this point, in hindsight, it seemed almost inevitable that these two would eventually feud as to which would reign supreme in terms of Christendom power. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the power of the Pope would still be greater than that of the Patriarch of Constantinople, at least on paper. However, the Byzantines controlled Rome from the 6th until the 8th century, and therefore controlled the Pope. A watershed moment in the papacy gaining independence from Constantinople was in 726, when Pope Leo III banned iconoclasm, alienating the Eastern faith from the Western. The difference between the Eastern and Western faiths is now beginning to show. While at this point it was a larger political one, with Rome turning away from the Byzantines in the 8th century, and to the Franks to the northwest, Pepin the Short, father of Charlemagne, the same one, of course, who drove away the Moors in the Battle of Tours in France, drove off the Lombards from attacking Rome, and gave all of the land from Rome to Ravenna to the Pope, thus creating the Papal States. Rome now had true independence from Byzantium, and the differences of religion only escalated further. The Pope was allied with Pepin, and the Byzantine emperors now turned to the Patriarch for spiritual legitimacy. In the year 800, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of Rome, thus creating the Holy Roman Empire. While I could go on about this for hours, the focus here is orthodoxy, or what will eventually become orthodoxy. This was significant because now, in quotes, Rome was back, and Byzantium became a rival rather than a loose ally for the first time ever. Charlemagne even went as far as conquering some Byzantine land, but Byzantium could not reply as they were under attack from the north by the Bulgarians and from the east by the Muslims. And by 865, there was actually a mad scramble between the Eastern and Western empires for Bulgaria, which plays a really big role in the spread of what will become Orthodoxy. Tsar Boris I announced that Bulgaria will be converting to Christianity, and Bulgaria was absolutely massive at the time. It had most of modern-day Greece. It stretched well into Ukraine and well into Austria. And in all honesty, the Bulgarian Empire had been giving Byzantium trouble for decades now. So them converting to the Eastern brand of Orthodoxy would make an incredibly important ally. Obviously, Tsar Boris would send letters both to the Pope and the Patriarch, and he would play one and then the other so he could up the stakes and eventually get what he wanted. And the reason that he chose Eastern Orthodoxy, or what would become Orthodoxy, is because they let him translate the Bible for the first time ever into a vernacular. Previous to this, the Bible would only be in the old Jewish language, Latin, and Greek. But now, Tsar Boris could translate the Bible into the Slavic alphabet. The only issue was there was no Slavic alphabet. So he hired Kirill and Methodi, known in the West as Kirill and Methodus. They were both of Bulgarian and Greek descent, scholars, so they were very familiar with both languages. And they created an alphabet for the Bible. Now, this was very important because it coupled the Eastern faith and the Slavic alphabet, also known as Cyrillic. And, of course, Bulgaria was big enough to stretch into Kievan Rus, and soon enough, not only would the religion travel all in the Bulgarian Empire, but the alphabet would as well. And it would travel to the other Slavic tribes as well. You know, if you wanted to learn the new alphabet, you had to read books with it. And the only books at the time that were written in this new alphabet were the holy books. So inadvertently, everybody who adopted the Cyrillic alphabet would also end up adopting Orthodox Christianity. And it wasn't until about 100 years later that modern-day Russia, what was then Kievan Rus, actually adopted Orthodoxy. And you know, translating into the vernacular was a big step for Orthodoxy. And it's not something the Roman Catholics would do for another 700 years, of course, in the 16th century with the Protestant Reformation. They were that stubborn that everything had to be read in Latin. And now we should get into some actual changes, some differences between the two religions. You know, over the centuries, slight liturgical practices would deviate simply because of distance and time. For example, some surface-level things would be the architecture, the different types of bread that were used during communion, and very slight different perceptions in the Holy Trinity that would honestly take me an entire other presentation to fully explain. So take my word for it, they are very, very slight. Even though there were so many misunderstandings, the two heads of the church were so far apart, the Christian religion was still technically one united body. Both of the heads tolerated each other's slight differences up until 1054 with the Great Schism. Essentially in 1053, because of some political tensions, the Pope said every single Eastern church in the Western territories had to do Latin. They could no longer use Greek. And in retaliation, the Patriarch said the same in his territories. And as a result of this, the Pope excommunicated the Patriarch, and the Patriarch excommunicated the Pope. And now this slight bending that was going on for centuries resulted in a break between the two branches of Christianity. And aside from the Fourth Crusade in 1204, there wasn't actually that many encounters between the two sides. Orthodoxy obviously took its biggest hit in 1453 when Suleiman sacked Constantinople, and interestingly, many contemporaries of the time wrote that the citizens of Constantinople actually preferred the Ottoman rule, the Islamic rule, over the rule of those, in quotes, heretic Latins. And because of this event, obviously the Patriarch could no longer be in Constantinople. He had to move to Moscow, where he still resides today. And it is this Patriarch of Moscow in the modern day who carries out the traditions of Orthodoxy, the one who facilitates and the preservation and growth of the culture and identity. He is the direct link between what Constantinople used to be and what some will see as effectively the new Constantinople, which is Moscow. And in the modern world, Russia is acting much in the similar way that the Byzantine Empire did, and defending and strengthening the Orthodox faith, which I'm sure Cole will delve into depth in later. And now, just to hit back on the architecture and what makes Orthodoxy distinct. Obviously, the culture is very important, and the buildings that people inhabit greatly influence their culture. And here to talk about that is Ben.
The bulbous or onion dome is a staple of Russian religious architecture and crowns some of the most iconic churches in all of Moscow, including the world-famous St. Basil's Cathedral. Onion domes can be found in Russian architecture back as far as the 13th century, influenced by the domes of the Eastern Orthodox world, as well as the more similarly shaped ones found in the Muslim Khanates of the time, given the fact that this period in Moscow's history is one pretty well marked by Mongol conquest. With Moscow's central role in Russian independence from the Mongols, and the spread of a Russian cultural hegemony in the region, creating the nation-state and later the Empire of Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church grew in power and influence in the city of Moscow. St. Basil's Cathedral, built in 1561 on the orders of Ivan the Terrible to commemorate the capture of the cities of Kazan and Astrakhan from Timur. It stands today as one of the most famous buildings in all of Russia, and an excellent example of how Moscow's architectural lineage compares and also contrasts to the previous millennium of Byzantine Orthodox tradition. The church is planned centrally, with 8 chapels surrounding a circular nave in the center, one of the hallmarks of traditional Byzantine religious architecture. What makes it so striking, then, apart from the dazzling colors on the outside, are the massive onion domes that rise high into the sky, making St. Basil's Cathedral the tallest building in Russia when it was completed. Now, the church itself had no precedents and no descendants. There are some disputed claims over the Byzantine or European or Islamic inspirations for such a church, but the fact remains that nothing like it had been built before or since. What makes it so great is that it really kind of popped up with no architectural precedent for it. There was no church that it was based off of. There was no really design that it was based off of. It was just a work of genius, never to be recreated again. St. Basil's Cathedral remained the defining symbol of Russia and of the Russian Orthodox Church until it was completely secularized into a museum by order of the Soviet Union in 1929 as a part of the state-imposed atheism in Russia and the Soviet Union at the time, which is a topic that Sam will now cover more in depth.
So, a major part of religion in Moscow and Russia overall is actually the lack thereof of religion. And of course, I'm talking about the time of state-sponsored atheism through the Soviet Union. So, state-sponsored atheism, like, what is it? Essentially, it's just the Soviet Union policies of dismantling and eradicating organized religion and religious thought. They thought of atheism as like an equalizing force, that there's no greater group of people, there's no greater religion because everyone's on the same page. And this is kind of brought on by their phrase, no gods, no kings, no heroes, because the proletariat is all one. And so why would they do this? This is a big question that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. And this is just because in communism, the proletariat must break their chains. This is what has been said by Karl Marx in the manifesto. It's about breaking all the proletariat away from the things that can control them, and they believe that religion is one of the biggest controllers of the proletarian. So it's about breaking the chains, and also religion was considered by the communists to be a chain. Especially in Russia, the church was very, very powerful. The Eastern Orthodox Church, a major part of the Eastern Orthodox Church was in Moscow, was in Russia. So therefore, that was like one of the biggest pieces, like the biggest chain, as you will, to need to be broken by the communists in order to free the proletariat. Additionally, if you get rid of religion, it kind of takes away like the outside thinking ability of its people. So it's like a way for the state to control the people because they kind of replaced religion with the state. The state became the new religion. So therefore, it was a way to get people to be like ride or die with the state. There was no going back from that. Additionally, the USSR attempted to create what they called the new man, and this was an atheistic human being that was a social justice warrior for the rest of the world, and it promoted unity amongst all people who are part of the proletariat. Everyone who's a communist they're not Russians. So say there was there's a Ukrainian and a Russian that were next to each other. They would try to during the new man policy, they would not see each other as a Russian or a Ukrainian. They'd see themselves equally as the proletariat. And the big thing that they wanted to do to promote this was to get rid of religion, because religions separate people. And so how did the state go about doing this? Well, they used massive propaganda campaigns. As you can see on the slide, they had very effective, very honestly well done anti-religious posters that were there to kind of get into the people's minds and kind of like say, oh yeah, I don't need religion. Religion's bad for me. As you can see, with the one where the Eastern Orthodoxy cross is a bar on a window of someone who's trying to pray and get out, and she's being kept back from the beautiful communist proletariat, like utopia on the other side of that wall. Additionally, they had magazines as well, anti-religion magazines that would post articles about how religion was essentially bad for you. It was like a form of like brainwash, you could say. Very powerful imagery. They also blew up and tore down the largest Orthodox cathedral on earth, and the Soviets built a palace on top of it. As you can see, it is the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, which is in the slide, that picture of it being on fire and on its way to destruction. So they got rid of all religious. They got rid of the majority of churches. They got rid of a lot of the clergy. They persecuted the clergy, and there was many other ways that they got rid of it, especially with imagery. They destroyed a lot of imagery, iconography, all those different things. And so the legacy of state-sponsored atheism within Russia and Moscow specifically is that more than only 10% of Russians today don't belong to faith, which is a very, very small number, especially with the rise of neoliberalism around the world, and the world is becoming more and more atheist. The people who used to be forced to be atheist are now no longer atheists, which is a very interesting look. And also, religious scholars on atheism they're very against it. It's because they were forced to be atheists. No one there wants to be atheist. So there's just a general consensus that religion is a good thing, and religion has come back with the youth in a very, very big way, which is just very shocking to everybody. And that is how state-sponsored atheism had an effect on Moscow and its lasting legacy.
Upon research, there have been conflicting opinions or views on the subject of post-anti-religion Russia. Statistical values range anywhere from 5 to 25% of people who do not belong to a religion. The Levada Center, which is a non-governmental polling and a sociological research facility, found that 5% of Russians called themselves atheist, while 10% said they do not belong to any religion. The protodeacon of the Russian Orthodox Church, Andrei Kuryev, stated, "I've already said that there are almost no atheists in Russia. Atheists today should be entered in the Red Book as a creature worthy of care and protection. In reality, there is the most mass religion of our time, occultism. Let it be that the interest in horoscopes and appeal to healers. Such domestic, low, magical religiosity is omnipresent. And so people who lived their lives not only without looking at the Bible or the Quran, but without taking into account popular magic television programs and advice, including astrological ones, are extremely few." So this would seem that religion in Russia has a very little effect on, or had a very little effect on, the amount of spiritual people in Russia when looking at the groups mentioned, or at least when taking those groups into account that Kuryev mentioned, and looking at statistics. Even though articles in the Constitution, the Russian Federation, like Articles 14, 19, and 28, do not allow any religion to be deemed public or mandatory, and church and state have basically been completely separated at this point, religion and orthodoxy still remains a large part of the culture in Russia. This is especially strange considering the push towards scientific atheism during the policy of irreligion in Russia, which could be taught in schools to children who would now be making up and informing a large part of the culture today. Just kind of looking at these statistics, though, and comments from, obviously, religious scholars and religious, officials in Russia wouldn't really be a holistic analysis. So after looking deeper into the issue, it seems that the real effect of irreligion had in Russia was within the act of practicing Christianity, itself, or any religion for that matter. Claiming to be religious and acting within your religion are two separate things. So a large amount of Russia acts outside of their religious beliefs, or at least outside of Orthodoxy, yet they still subscribe to that faith. Professor Niels Christian Nielsen at Wright University comments that I guess areas that were largely Orthodox are now nearly illiterate regarding religion and are without the deeper elements of their faith and are almost unaware to other faiths. So even though a large amount of people, I guess, still practice or claim to practice Christianity in Russia, the actual act of practicing it has been largely changed because of the irreligion, I guess, period within Russia.